If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, what is a paranormal, creepy, or unexplainable thing that has happened to you? Maybe 8 or 9 years ago, my younger brother was playing Xbox with our neighbor online. He was home alone and started freaking out, saying he could hear someone upstairs. A few minutes later he showed up at our house. He was probably 15 years old at the time, almost in tears. My brother, him, and myself headed back over to his place. As we went in, his dog was out walking in the kitchen. So I figured it was just the dog. Then we heard clear as day someone walking around upstairs. Instead of leaving, I didn't want to act scared or nervous, so I slowly went up the stairs. At the top of the stairs I could hear someone walking in his parents' room and like a scuffling sound. Everyone was kind of behind me farther down the stairs and heard it too. The scariest part was that the dog started to whine. I yelled for anyone in the room to come out. After a minute or so of not hearing anything, we all rushed in. The room was empty, the closet was empty, the bathroom was empty. Needless to say, he spent the night at our house. I've told this story here before. I used to take walks in the woods of Appalachia quite a bit when I was younger. I've told the story of turnarounds, so this time I'll just remember the basement. I came across a really old clapboard house. It was so old and decrepit that the floors had fallen in, and only parts of the outside walls and some of the chimney still stood. I looked at it for a minute, and then a thought pops in my head. If I go around the right side and around the back, I'll find some stairs leading down to the basement. I'm already here, I might as well go say hello. I walked around the house's right side and found the stairs. I went down them and I knocked on the door. After the second knock, I hear someone on the other side scrabbling at the locks on the other side, like in a huge rush. I heard them mutter to themselves, "Just a minute, don't go, don't go." All at once I realized where I was, what I was doing, and the fact that someone was about to open that door. I got the hell out of there, fast. I've never been back. This is long, but please bear with me. This is the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. I have a close friend whose family owns quite a bit of land that we regularly hunt and camp on. Normally we just go up for a few days or a weekend or whatever and bullshit in the woods and drink a bit and shoot for target practice in the summer. The property is set up so that there's a large clearing about 300 yards long and 200 yards wide where they have 2 travel trailers and 2 barns that we stay in and keep all the 4-wheelers and broken stand and feeders and corn and stuff in. On the west side of the clearing is probably 15 to 20 rows of pine trees that were planted for an agricultural tax write-off, that are about 150 yards long. To the east and north are the dense woods we hunt. Without fail, every time, my friend's dad will call around 10:30 to 11 p.m., and challenge one of us to walk all the way from the trailer to the very end of the last pine tree row, where there's a corner formed by 2 fences meeting, unarmed and with no light source whatsoever. It's incredibly spooky and none of us have taken up his challenge. This is where it gets spooky. One night we are up at the property and it gets to be about 2 a.m., me and my friend leave his younger brother and our other friend in the trailer to go double check that the barn is closed up and everything is as it should be. On the way out, I grab my 30-30 rifle and he is 9mm. We make it around the barn, locking everything up, and decide to check the edges of the woods for any hogs or coyotes that may be foraging. We are making a big loop around the edges of the tree rows back to the trailer, casually glancing down them for any sign of animals. When we hit the last row, we freeze dead in our tracks as we see a large animal, probably a deer, roughly 2/3 of the way down the row. Slowly, we make our way about 45 to 50 yards down the row, only to find that this wasn't a deer. In the pale moonlight we are able to make out that this deer has no antlers, long pointed ears, and legs like a dog. Essentially it appeared to be a massive coyote. It moved incredibly slowly, like it must have taken it 30 seconds to kind of crouch its front legs and head down like a dog does to look at us. We've taken a knee, with both our guns trained on this thing, whispering to each other about what the fuck this is, debating whether or not to fill it full of bullets. We're too scared to even shine a flashlight on it. It slowly turned to stand broadside to us, then even more slowly turned its head first back towards us, then again the rest of its body so it's again facing straight at us. We noticed that its legs were extremely long and skinny, and its body was built like a deer's rather than a coyote's, but it definitely had a coyote's head and tail. We had decided to blast this thing straight to hell, and we again raised our guns, and I pulled the hammer on my rifle to full cock, basically off safety. My friend decided our best bet was to aim at its upper chest, count down from 3, then shoot simultaneously. He started counting breathlessly, and I'm sure we were both drenched in nervous sweat, anxious to shoot, but when he said 2 there was an extremely loud crash in the dense woods to our right, like a widowmaker falling. We both spun, guns up, sure we were being ambushed by another huge coyote/deer thing. We whipped back to where the animal had been standing, clicked on a flashlight, and it was gone. That was it. It had just vanished. We checked and double-checked the area and only found matted grass where it must have walked. We were both absolutely stone cold sober at the time, and both double-checked with each other months after, to make sure of what we saw. The next morning, I went out at the ass crack of dawn to try to hunt some hogs, and posted up at the most active pig spot on the property, and the woods were impossibly still and quiet. I didn't even hear a hog or squirrel or anything other than some bird move all day, which is very unusual. He mentioned this to his dad, who got quiet and simply said that strange things live/happen on that property. It still rattles me to this day, and I have absolutely no explanation or even an inkling of what it could have been or how a coyote would even get that big, or disappear so fast and quietly after moving so slowly before. A friend claimed to have made contact with something not of this world. Me being the inquisitive type asked her to ask it to demonstrate itself. She said that it said it did not do parlor tricks. So I laughed, told her to tell it that I thought it was a load of BS and that I went to bed. It should be noted the friend in question was hours away and could not have caused what happened next. I was woken up by an icy cold jab on my left leg. It was like someone soaked a Q-tip in liquid nitrogen and touched me. When I stirred it stopped, and every time I started to doze off again it started until I got up. There was a message from my friend. She said it says it hopes you'll believe in it now, also you sleep rather heavily. About 10 years ago I lived in a free house. I know, right there I should have known better, but I was a broke college kid. The caveat was managing the small, secluded property with some pastures, a barn, and some school horses needing medical care or R&R. No rent, no utilities, free Wi-Fi. Sold. The house was small, likely built in the 50s, yet it had a massive basement packed full of belongings from countless previous persons who'd all left the property at some point or another. I'd never met any of them, not even the girl who'd been there right before me. After a few months, I got a wild hair and started cleaning. Everything that wasn't useful to the house or barn got dumped. I found more clothes and books and bits of furniture than could fit in my truck to donate. Things had been quiet up until the cleanup though. Over the following weeks I kept seeing shadows in the front windows whenever I was outside. Tricks of the light surely, or I'd blame it on the cat and think nothing more of it. Then the lights in the basement kept turning on, and I could only convince myself so many times that I forgot. Even though I began using that space less and less, doing laundry off-site even to avoid the basement as I felt increasingly uncomfortable down there. Then one night in early October, I was forced out. I'd been doing homework in my bedroom all evening, nearly 11:30 with the cat tucked with me in bed. I saw the stairwell light pop on. And then the sound of what I can only describe as heavy boots slowly climbing the wooden stairs echoed up. The cat panicked first. He tried to bolt for the closed window as an overwhelming feeling of dread came over me. Something in me screamed that if I didn't leave right then and there I never would. I grabbed my keys and ran for the front door, left it wide open and jumped into my truck. The poor cat hopped in too. I sat there for a few seconds, staring at the house and saw nothing, so I left for a friend's place. I've never been so scared. I went back the next day, doors still open, lights still on, and loaded everything I could grab in 10 minutes. Put in my 2 weeks and finished the job while living off-site. Never went back into the house ever again. No one had signed up to live there by the time I left, and I hope they demolished that house. Many years ago, my brother and I would have our friends over for LAN parties. They'd just haul their computers and consoles over to our place for the weekend whenever we were like 10 to 12 years old. Parents were gone for the night, so we were home alone staying up late just gaming. There was a moderately strong storm going on around 1 a.m. that made the power go out. We were all using desktop PCs, no laptops and no battery backup devices. Somehow, my PC started booting back up before the power came back, and it loaded into one of those really old school chat rooms. It was just a large black screen with white lines separating a list of users and a place to type. The only users were us, guest, and another user named Bad Luck. Bad Luck typed tonight was the worst night of my entire life. And now I'm going to make it yours. After he typed that, the power came back on, and my brother and friends will swear up and down that they heard something at the back door, but whenever we checked, nothing was there. The whole thing was legitimately terrifying for a 10 to 12-year-old to experience. I'm just glad that I had multiple people around who also witnessed it. We definitely couldn't get to sleep that night, but we tried to just put it out of our minds and play games again. Late to the party as always. I've also told this story before. So I'll give the gist, and if anyone wants to know more, I'll try and answer. My friend and I went camping in 2010 on the Utah and Nevada border. Miles away from any town. Had a pretty good time and went to sleep in the bed of my truck. I woke up at some time in the night to a bright light. Like daytime, but it was a white light. Nothing like sunlight. It lit up the treetops around us and was casting a shadow into the bed of my truck. So I set up to see what it was. I remember thinking it was a spotlight from a DNR truck or hunters. Then blackness and I'm awake and it's the crack of dawn. I'm laying down again in the truck bed. Now I'm sure that a lot of people will suggest sleep paralysis. I assure you that this is the only time in my life that anything like that has happened. Being almost a decade later, I still haven't experienced anything like it. So in my old neighborhood there was this garage sale that I decided to go to, and because I was a child, I of course found a porcelain doll that I really liked. Yeah, I know I'm basically a horror movie character in the making. I got my parents to buy it, because why not? Fast forward 2 years later, while moving into my new house I had accidentally broke one of its legs, and I never got around to fixing it because I didn't really play with it or anything anymore, so I just put it in a box on a shelf in my closet, where it is to this day. Now this happened about 3 years later. One day my family and I decided to go for a walk in a park nearby, but my mom decided to stay home for a reason I don't remember. So we had left to go to the park almost immediately after I had woken up, so I didn't get the chance to make my bed yet. So when we get back I go upstairs to do some homework, and I get greeted with the sight of this doll sitting on the top of my neatly made bed, and on top of that, its leg is now fixed. Okay, no biggie, my mom just probably made my bed and for whatever reason found the doll, fixed it, and put it on my bed. And I would have found this sweet if not for the fact that after I asked my mom about it she said she had gone grocery shopping, with the newly bought groceries as proof, and had no clue about the doll. So yeah, I put it back in the box, covered it with salt, and it now stays in my closet because my mom doesn't want me burying it because she's very religious and says it would make the situation worse. But now I hear tapping noises in my closet at night that is most definitely a human finger, so okay mom, just let your daughter become possessed by a mysterious doll thing. But I mean, it wasn't completely horrible, at least it made my bed for me. More so unexplainable than creepy, but every year since my grandma had unexpectedly passed away in a car accident, my family would hold a traditional feast on my grandmother's native reserve. If you don't know what a feast is, it's basically a traditional ceremony in honor of someone's life. At this feast you have friends, family all gathered around in a large circle with food, snacks, fruit all in the center. After prayers and words from elders, men usually pass out the food to everyone, making sure that everyone gets something. Anyway, after all the food had been passed out, which consisted of various different kinds of soups, different pops, bannock, fruits, cookies, cake, and candies. There were a few family members and close friends that were invited to say a few words about my grandma. After my papa, my other grandmother, and a close family friend had said their words, it was time for one of my aunts to say her words. But suddenly once she started to speak, the lights flickered in the building. Everyone kinda murmured and my aunt continued to speak, but this time her voice a little more shaky. Then again the lights flickered, but this time the power went out completely. We all reacted, of course, how you would when the power were to go out, but someone made the comment, "She's here." That kinda made a few people laugh, but my aunt was so freaked out all she said was, "Haha, yes, Linda was an amazing woman and we all miss her every day, thank you." And sat down quickly. I'd like to think that maybe my grandma was there, and maybe she really was trying to speak to us, but maybe the power just went out because of how windy and cold it was that day. No matter the case, I still remember that day clear as ever. There was a house down the street near my bus stop. It had been abandoned for years and I saw many squatters passing in and out of it. Kids at my stop started making rumors about it, saying it was haunted and only homeless people were allowed to enter because a hobo died inside the house. My sister and I thought it would be a good idea to test the theories out. Boy, were we wrong. We went to the house on Saturday and walked onto the property. I had a nervous feeling about just stepping onto its grounds. We walked up to the house and tried to open the door. It wouldn't budge. It was locked. We went around the house and found a back door. It was unlocked. We went inside and I kid you not, the house reeked of mold and rot. There were so many insects, both dead and living, scattered on the walls and floors. We kept walking in the house, looking around. My sister's flashlight at that point had been having issues. It finally gave out and she left it on the dusty table covered in leaves. This was a keynote I made in my head, since the flashlight was our dad's. The halls were narrow and old, wallpaper faded and peeling off. We heard random banging in the house and every time we looked for the source of the noise, there was nothing in sight. Tired and sick of the stench, we decided to leave. We went back to the kitchen to get the flashlight. It was on the kitchen counter, 4 feet away from the dusty table. Someone had to have picked it up and put it there. There were no signs of forced entry, and we shut the door upon entering. No one was in the house but us. Then we heard the door slam. It wasn't the back door either. It was the front door. It was not physically possible to open that door because the lock was busted inside, so it could not open without heavy force. Me and my sister freaked the hell out and ran our scared asses back home. What was even scarier was that we forgot our dad's flashlight. Okay, so I get a little fucked up if I think too hard about this, but I have bipolar disorder and I hallucinate, so I often dismiss anything I experience as a hallucination. It's just easier to process that way. A few years ago my family and I moved into a new home, into a neighborhood that was rumored to be built on Native American grounds. Growing up I thought that was all shit, and as an adult I still thought it was shit. One night I was laying down in my mini basement apartment and I swear to God it sounded like someone with heavy footsteps jumped through the window and ran at me full speed. I froze and convinced myself I was hallucinating. This happened 4 times before I mentioned it to my boyfriend, and he confirmed that he would lay there and think he was having a night terror or whatever and just dismiss it. Now I don't know what to think of it. Hasn't happened in over a year. I learned that the dude who develops the properties out here has found artifacts in a couple of the lots and that those lots can't be developed, so maybe there is some validity to those claims? I don't know, but I can't explain the footsteps. It happened about 15 years ago. I was visiting my great aunt with my grandma and my great uncle. Ga, great aunt lived in rural area in Korea. She lived with her granddaughters, both few years older than me. We'll call them Y and S. We get there, hang out till nighttime. We gather around for dinner, when I notice something on the floor. It was between 2 door frames, rooms were right next to each other. It was fuzzy but definitely a picture of a lady, long hair, lips, etc., like a driver's license picture. I pointed out to GA and ask what it is. She clearly does not want to answer and dismisses the question. I run my thumb over it just to make sure it's not some dust or whatever that could coincidentally be there to make it look like a face. It's imprinted on the floor. Time goes on, me and Y are hanging out watching TV. S is sleeping in the room that's on the left side of the picture. Y, being older than me, suggests that we both go to sleep. We both go to the room where S is sleeping in. Lights out. I couldn't sleep and I doze after about an hour of tossing and turning. Suddenly, through my closed eyes, I can tell that there's some sort of light. I open my eyes to see some sort of figure surrounded by bluish light in the top left side of corner of where we were sleeping in. Then I hear a woman's voice in the room. Both stop quickly. I'm freaked out and realize S was awake. I ask her, "Did you hear that? What was that?" She said it must have been great uncle, S, a known alcoholic. I asked, "Did you see the blue thing?" S, "What blue thing?" Me, "There was some sort of blue thing in the corner." S, "I think you're just imagining stuffs, go back to sleep." She wasn't awake to see the blue light, so I assumed it was the sound that woke her up. Comes morning, I realize great uncle wasn't even on the same floor. We were in the basement. GM were all drinking and slept in first floor. I go to look where the picture was, gone. No trace of fuzzy picture of a lady whom GA denied to answer any questions about, but she clearly knew something. We were there for another night and nothing happened that night. I didn't say a single word about the incident to anyone. Another notable thing here is that GA's side of family, well, mainly her, definitely dabbled into Korean shamanism. I don't believe in paranormal whatsoever, however whenever I think back to this experience it always tells me there could be otherwise. A quick backstory before I get into it. The house that I live in right now is quite old, built in the 40s or 50s, and my parents bought it when I was only a few years old, so we've lived in it for a really long time. This means that I have a lot of stories from both my perspective and my family's perspective. Me and my siblings, my mom and other family members have sworn that we've heard, seen and felt people in the house for years. When me and my little brothers were really young, my older cousin was over babysitting. She was only 12 or 13 at the time and we decided to play hide and seek. So she turned all of the lights off and went off to find us. While she was searching for us, she heard a woman's voice screaming bloody murder from downstairs. Just to remind you, it was only my cousin, me and my little brothers. There would be no way for anyone to get into the house. It scared the absolute shit out of her and we all hid out in my room until my parents came home 2 hours later. My cousin later checked and there was no one downstairs. A couple years later, I was cleaning up our bathroom, which took about an hour or so. As I finished, it was about 1:30 a.m, my mom woke up and so did my younger brother, Andrew. So at this point I'm awake and hyper and it's the weekend, So I say fuck it and decide to go down the stairs to get a Coke. When I'm literally just about to go down the stairs, a middle-aged woman's voice loudly exclaimed hello. It scared the absolute shit out of me and I didn't go downstairs for about a week. Andrew, a few days later, was about to go downstairs when he heard the woman's voice, too. He described it as a middle-aged woman's voice. Same thing I heard. My mom has heard the voice, too. All three of us are still super wary of downstairs now. My last story takes place in about January-ish of this year, 2019. I was babysitting my brothers while my parents were out getting groceries. Me and Andrew were just kinda chillin' in the living room. My youngest brother, Benjamin, was in his room doing his own thing, so he didn't really get to witness what we both did. The living room is connected to the kitchen, and you need to go through the kitchen to go downstairs. So both of us were chillin' when we heard really loud footsteps coming from the stairs to go downstairs. So I'm like, WTF? We're definitely the only ones home. My brother hears it at the same time as me, so both of us start freaking the fuck out. So I yell out if someone's there, and no one responds. The footsteps stopped temporarily, but resumed after a minute or so. So both me and my brother are freaking out, right? And we watched the stairs from our couch to see if someone was there, but no one was there. My parents came home a few minutes later, but it was the freakiest thing since both of us witnessed it and heard the exact same thing. No one was in the house except for us. It still scares the shit out of both of us to this day. Oh boy, my time has come. This is going to be a very long one and I will summarize everything at the end for people that don't have the time to read. So, we have this creepy park called Main Park in NY. It's behind a school and contains a playground, picnic benches, an old tennis court that no longer has a net, a baseball field and is surrounded by trees. There are several walking trails in the woods. One of them is back by the tennis court and leads to a creek that goes pretty far back and it also branches off and goes up 2 hills. The other trail is at the back of the park. The very first instance in this park was when I went with my girlfriend and her sister to check out the trail by the tennis court. So, how it was set up back there is that the trail goes back and then goes up a hill. Right when it is about to start going up, you can go off to the right and down this tiny path to the creek. About 2 minutes before you reach the hill, there is another path that leads back slightly and up a hill into the woods. That's important for the second time we come here. So, we go to the creek and then decide to go back up into the main path and go up the hill. There is a huge rock in the middle of the hill and we walk past it a bit and get to nearly the top where it starts to flatten out before we stop and see about 20 to 30 feet away what appears to be a deer leg that still has fur in it stuck about 5.5 to 6 feet up in the tree. My partner is sensitive to spirits and paranormal entities and I didn't really see it or pay attention to anything going on way up the hill behind it, but my partner swears that they saw a gray thing about that was probably 6 to 7 feet long crawling down the hill towards us. My partner didn't say much and just yanked me down the hill saying that there was something crawling towards us. My partner's sister and I actually completely forgot about this and would be the first time we forgot something after we had been to this particular park. The second time it was just my partner's sister and I that went. We decided to check for the deer leg. This was about 2 days after, and it was gone. We went up the other hill that branched off of the main path and went up the hill and back into the woods. We had machetes with us as well. We didn't really see anything, but the highlights of the experience were that it was really quiet the whole walk until my friend put her machete down to tie her shoes. All the birds started chirping and branches were cracking. I started panicking for her to hurry up and it just felt like something was going to try something because we were now briefly unarmed. It was so weird. We hadn't felt like that until that moment. For the rest of the way we felt like we were being watched. We needed up at the path that was the back of the park. Part of the trail had stairs on it that just creeped us out too. Not to mention that 5 feet away from this trail was a large patch of woods that was pitch black because of the thicker trees. The third time we went, we all came back to the park and actually had 2 friends with us. One of them being another person sensitive to energy. He said that the park had a lot of energy for a location not being in a ley line. We went up past the tree we saw the deer leg in and walked for about an hour. It was almost dark by the time we made it out. When we decided to turn around and head back, there was a guy sitting in a fallen tree that was in the edge of a steep hill overlooking the creek. We had been looking behind us the whole time and hadn't heard or seen anybody following us. He sat there with his good up swaying back and forth slightly. The sensitive friend told us not to talk to him and keep moving. My partner had a weird feeling that if he turned around, he wouldn't look human. We hurried out of there and the 2 friends left and it was just my partner, her sister, and I left. The last thing we saw before we left was the lights in the park doing a weird pattern and there was one car at the end of the parking lot that had no one in it. We were very sure of that because we drove past it to check. We went and parked near the entrance to the park and watched the lights. The car turned on for a few seconds and then off again, and we drove by it again and it had no one in it. We decided to leave after that. The last few things were feeling like we were being watched and weird laughter out of nowhere sometimes during these visits and visits after. The last time any of us went there was my partner's sister and her ex went to the park and decided to walk around back in the woods. Well, near the creek they stumbled upon a girl in her 20s, dressed in all black doing a ritual of some sorts. She left when she noticed them, but they somewhat saw what the ritual looked like. There was an upside down pentagram on a piece of cloth. There were candles lit on each point and she was whispering and reading from an upside down book. This was the last time we ever went. This happened when I was around 9 or 10. I was in the dining room next to the kitchen spinning around and around on an office chair that happened to be in there. The kitchen is in full view from where I was, so if anyone were to enter it I would know. Mind you, I was the only one in the room. My brother was in his room down the hall and my mom was upstairs, but my dog was in the living room next to the dining room. As I'm spinning in the chair, I spin back around to where I'm facing the kitchen and I see a towering black figure standing there, staring at me. I don't really remember the details of what it looked like, but all I can remember is that it was completely jet black and featureless. I only saw it for a split second before I spun back around on the chair, and when I went to face the kitchen it was completely gone. Weirded out by this, I go to my brother's room and asked him if anyone else was in the house. He said no. He said if anyone was to enter the house my dog would be barking, and she was completely silent when this happened. To this day I still have no solid idea of what it could have been. Okay, I've never spoken of this to anyone since that night. This was 10 years ago. I worked a crappy kitchen job back then. Driving home my roommate called and said it was beginning to snow and he wanted to ride around. I live in Haywood Company, North Carolina, the highest average elevation county east of the Mississippi. A large portion of my county is national forest and parks. When I got home, let's call him Charles, was already drinking. He had around 6. He wanted to ride up to the Blue Ridge Parkway and see if the gates were locked, as this was the first snow of the year and a surprising one at that. No snow is laying at our home, but there are flurries. We grab another 6-pack and begin our drive. I don't drink and drive, the beer is for him. It's roughly a 20 minutes drive to the Parkway, and as we climb in elevation the snow is more persistent, but it's around 10 degrees Fahrenheit outside, so it just blows off the sides of the road. I have a great traction. In a short while we make it and turn left, west, onto the Parkway. It's beautiful and so quiet/still, but to our dismay the gate is locked at Devil's Courthouse Overlook. It has a large parking lot to turn around and we briefly consider climbing to the top, but it's so cold we decide to see if the other direction, east, is blocked. We pass where we started and in 5 minutes are approaching the other gate. Now this is where it gets crazy. It's snowing hard at this point, so visibility is probably 50 to 75 feet. I approach the gate at 20 to 30 miles per hour and make a wide turn because the turnaround at this gate is much smaller. As I'm beginning my turn, the wind changes direction and visibility returns to 100%. Then I see a family crossing the road. There is no trail here, just coming over the bank on one side and heading to the woods on the other side. The man in front is probably late 50s to mid 60s with long white hair and beard and wearing worn out denim overalls. Behind him is a 20s male in jeans and a white tee, followed by a woman in her 50s wearing an ancient looking dress and a black shawl. Lastly, a little girl of maybe age 10 wearing a nightgown and dragging a large nasty teddy bear brings up the rear of the group. The old man looks directly at me. His eyes are solid black, and I got an immediate sense of dread and despair. It was a look that said GTF out of here. They all had these hollow eyes. I wasted no time making a hasty U-turn and wanted to get home quickly. Nothing was said. On the way down the mountain, Charles turns to me and asks if we just saw a ghost family, drunkenly. I say I think so, and we never have spoken of it again. It's dozens of miles to anywhere one could park a car, as both places I turned around were empty, and probably hours walking from shelter. I don't know how long a 10-year-old girl could survive in a silky gown, but I'm guessing less than 2 hours at 10 degrees Fahrenheit and 20 miles per hour winds. The clothing looked to be 1950s at latest, and around this time the park and surrounding area had logging families. I've never been that afraid since I saw a ghost family. It was a couple years ago, but I still remember like it was yesterday. In 6th grade my family lived in a small one-story home. We had a central living room which had doors connecting the room to the kitchen, the dining room and the hallway to the rooms. I had a bunk bed in my room, which was not the greatest idea as there was a ceiling fan, but I managed by being extra careful when it was on, or else I would have been seriously hurt. So one night my brother was at our aunt's house with my dad and stepmom, and I go to sleep per usual, but I decide to turn the ceiling fan on and carefully climb up to my bed. I go to sleep. The next part is what leaves me confused even to this day. I woke up and it was around 2 a.m. or so, but I'm in the living room. All the doors leading to other rooms are shut, and there's a corner lamp on. There was also a blanket covering me that looked like someone had put it on me. I walk out of the living room and check if my family is home, which they are not. I then go to my room and the ceiling fan is still on. Sure, this story sounds like I'm sleepwalking, but before and after that incident I never have sleepwalked again. What also shocks me is that even if I did, how would I get off my bunk bed even with the fan on, as I would have been seriously injured? I've asked my family about it many times, but they keep telling me no one was home except for me. I lived in a haunted bedroom for a few years as a teenager. It all started happening shortly after a specific occurrence where I encountered someone with a demon a hold of them, their words. That night I felt an evil presence in my room. I had no idea what to do, so I just started talking to it, saying Jesus' name and all that, because I remember at some point learning that in the Bible states about demons having to bow at the name of Jesus. I finally told it to leave my room. I heard a voice clear as day whisper, yet spoke clearly into my ear, "I'll be back," no pun towards Arnold Schwarzenegger. I went on several months happy and forgotten about it. Then it started happening. Almost every single night something would happen to me. One night, I woke up and my entire room was solid red and glowing. Some nights I would hear things outside moaning and chains rustling. Some nights I woke up and my entire bed was shaking. Needless to say, I lived in a constant fear of going to sleep in that room. I finally found a place to go one night, thinking I could finally get some rest. I was asleep in the floor of my best friend's bedroom. I woke up and saw someone standing in the doorway. Then slowly started walking my way. My thought was, oh great, Matthew's trying to scare me. When it got closer to where I was, I could tell it wasn't Matthew or even human. It was a translucent figure with dark areas where his eyes should be. It knelt down at my head and placed its hand on my shoulder. A strong burning sensation occurred and shot through that entire area. It all culminated in me waking up one night asleep on my bed and hearing a small sweet voice saying, "If you want to see an angel, turn around." I quickly turned around, and hovering directly over my bed was a white-robed translucent figure. When I locked eyes with it, its face got startled and it vanished. It was a different feeling. One of peace. One of security. So this happened when I was in 6th grade. I had a boring life, so I had told my friend that our apartment was haunted, and so began the paranormal investigations. On one day, after finishing our investigation and heading to my house, which was in the 4th floor BTW, we were forced to use the stair because the elevator was under maintenance or whatever. Anyway, we're just climbing and talking about everything we were to do after lunch when we climbed in the 2nd floor. Now, one prominent thing about this floor was the lack of signs that say which floor you're in. Every other floor in the building had a professional board with the floor number written on it, but this floor only had a blue pen mark and scratches everywhere, but like normal worn-out scratches, not creepy ghost scratches. Anyway, we continue climbing and we start to get tired and then climb on to the next floor to find that we climbed into the 2nd floor, again. We literally went from 2nd floor to another identical 2nd floor. I noticed this but don't say anything cause I thought that I was just having deja vu, even though we were talking something completely different from the previous floor and our body movements were different too. It was as if the only similarity the memory had with what was happening was the location itself. Anyway, as we're slowly climbing out of the second floor, my friend freezes, turns to me and says, "We already climbed this floor just now." I was literally shook to the core and I just kept mumbling, "I know." We then ran through the flights of stairs and went home. Later, after we cooled down, we climbed through those stairs several times to find that second floor, but it never came back again. I'd have wondered how that happened and what caused it. I'm still a skeptical person, but I'll say that I have no logical explanation to it. I've got two. Both would have been when I was around age 9 or 10. My room in this house we lived in was very dark. It had burgundy/gray sponge spackled wall paint, and no overhead light. So I relied on lamps to light it, and I had this tall, 1.5 meters, black lamp with 3 bulbs that faced in different directions as my only light source. Its base was heavy, and about a 1-foot diameter. One day I'm sitting on the floor playing with some toys, in complete silence, and out of freaking nowhere, my black lamp falls over and lands next to me. I never bolted from somewhere so hard in my life. I've thought about this occasionally ever since, trying to think of a reason it could have happened. There was nothing hanging on the lamp that would have caused it to fall. The window was sealed shut with plastic, so no drafts or wind. Nothing else moved or shook in the house, so not an earthquake. No loud noises, no big trucks passed by outside. To this day, I can't explain it. Second one was in the same room. I had this wooden desk where if you pull a drawer out, depending on what's inside, it'll stay level for a bit, but pull it out far enough and the front end will rock down ever so slightly due to gravity. I guess the sliders inside had some give and you could pull it past the balance point, causing the front to fall down a few millimeters. That's the best way I can explain it. Also, if you had the drawer out slightly and pushed down on the front, you could cause it to rock down the same way, and if you let go it'd go back up, with a distinctive double clunking sound. Well again, one day I was sitting alone in my room playing in silence, not facing the desk, and I hadn't closed one of the drawers all the way. And I absolutely positively heard twice in a row the double clunk of that drawer being pushed down, and bouncing back up. I ran crying out of my room terrified and not wanting to go back in. Again, can't explain how that noise happened. It was definitely the sound of someone intentionally pushing down on the drawer twice. Just for context, I and Ross talk mostly online, and he's never seen any of my friends when he came to my hometown. So for the past year, my friend Ross and I had various visions of possible future events and places, such as Ross seeing one of my friends that he's never seen before randomly in a dream. Another strange event is when I and Ross had the exact bizarre dream, only I saw it from a different perspective. Ross saw the dream in a first person as himself, but I saw the exact dream in the first person of a white levitating human-like creature. The dream, in case you're wondering about, was him and a new kid from his school running through a field of ashes towards a white house with the paint of that house peeling and the windows boarded up. As they entered the house they saw something crawling out of the basement, terrifying them, making them run to a metal and glass greenhouse, but it was empty with a seam on the floor as if it opened somehow, but before they could find a way to open it someone outside locked them in and gassed them, causing them to pass out. And after Ross passed out he woke up. Now there are many more events of this type of stuff happening with me and Ross. Mine was 2 years ago, a month after we had bought our new house from my wife's best friend's parents. Our property sits on 8 acres of land, 4 of which are fields, and where the house sits the other is all wooded. There's 15 homes on our street and you can't see any of them but a roof on one that is next us. You can barely see their garage light at night. Needless to say, it's very dark at our place at night. The previous owner owned horses, so the back lot is 2 acres of grass where the horses could roam freely. A farm fence separates this area with a house and the side yard. Our den faces this back acreage with a clear view of everything during the day. At night, unless the moon is out, it's hard to tell what out there. I was in the middle of renovating the entire house, and at the time only the den had a functioning area to sleep. We had a sleeper sofa that was in this room and it faced the windows. My wife didn't want curtains on these windows, and there are 3 of them. All of them are 6 feet by 3 feet wide. My daughter and I were the only ones staying in the house at the time, as she had a bed in one of the rooms. One night, around 2 a.m., I awoke to some kind of a bright flash. It was like lightning, but there were no clouds in the sky. I remember this because I looked out the window and you could clearly see the stars. My daughter came running into the room asking if I saw the light. I thought our transformer blew on our light pole. So I got my pants, shoes and jacket and walked outside with my flashlight to check to see if that was the case so I could contact the electric company. I walked out to the pole and saw that there were no scorch marks on it. I turned the flashlight off and headed back to the back door. Now the transformer is in the side yard about 30 yards from the side of the house. The grass had a light layer of frost on it and I could see my breath and hear myself walking. For some reason I decided to look into the back field and I could clearly make out 3 figures, one of which was a little bit brighter than the others. All of them were walking back toward the creek. I just stood there and couldn't think WTF these things were. They were like people, but the movements were wrong. Like their feet weren't really touching the ground, as I could hear them walking on the frost. I don't know how long I stood there, but it wasn't long and 2 of the figures seemed to merge and disappear while the brighter one kind of stood there. It looked like it was turning back to the house for one last look. Then it too dissipated. I stood there perplexed by this and finally walked back into the house, as I'm sitting in my kitchen with my daughter, who said she saw the figures too and was trying to determine what it was. My phone rang. It's around 2:45 at this point. It's from the owner of the house. She's clearly been crying and she tells us that her husband had lost his battle with cancer at 2:03 a.m. After she said this, I just sat there with the most blank stare. I didn't know what to say other than sorry and if there's anything I can do. After I hung up, my daughter says it was Tom, wasn't it? I said, I don't know what else it could have been. I was pretty deep into renovating the house, and because of his cancer he could never come see what all we had already updated. All he got was secondhand info that I gave him, and he would always say, "Man, I wish I could see it." They owned the house for 42 years but became too hard to keep up. Tom, I hope everything I did had your approval before you made your journey to the next life.